Welcome to the Honest Health Podcast with your host, Jeffrey Burke. Honest Health brings you the brightest minds in the natural products industry, as well as athletes and entertainers. Jeff will keep you entertained and informed while educating on how to be successful on your healthy journeys. Now, here's your host, Jeffrey Burke.
Hello and welcome back to the Honest Health Podcast. My name is Jeffrey Burke. I'm so glad you're here. My platform here is bringing you the most up-to-date, groundbreaking information from some of the best minds within the natural products industry, as well as some voices outside of the industry. Everybody, all of them, with awesome messages to share. Because in my mind, everybody has something to share. And you know what? I've learned along the way, it doesn't matter where you get that missing piece of information, because we all need a little piece, a missing piece of the puzzle. And wherever it comes from, we just got to be grateful that we were able to tune in and hear about it. As you tune into the podcast, if you like what I'm doing, please consider giving me a like, a share, or a subscribe. Better yet, I'd appreciate it if you could do all three of them, especially going to my YouTube channel. Make sure you push that subscribe button. I want to keep the visibility out and make sure that all the love, all the light is on my guest, and they get the exposure that they deserve for all the hard work that they do every single day. My guest today is Bruno, and as you can see from the description of the program, he's an incredible talent, and he is also a very, 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 very dear friend of mine for, my goodness, more years than I can even think about. It's been a long time, Gene. Welcome back to the show.
It is great to be back, Jeff. And yeah, I was sitting there trying to calculate since we've been friends. I mean, sometime in the 80s, I just can't remember.
81, 82.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
Lord. So
we're old, Jeff. We're old.
Yes, but we met when we were in a playpen and we were 2. So
that's right.
So how you doing? What's new in your world?
I am doing great. I'm having a lot of fun. I was going to say a lot of travel. Nothing compared to the amount of travel you do, but, been going around to different places, went to China earlier in the year, went to Barcelona, and I've made a few other trips to the trade shows, supply side, and so forth. And so that's all been great. And working on some fascinating stuff, developing some new ingredients. We're doing some studies, and it's all pretty interesting. I like that I've reached a place in my career where like 99% of what I do, I enjoy doing. So I feel very lucky.
Well, we're kind of blessed in different ways. I love to be out in front. I love to be on the air. I love to be in front of an audience and doing what I do, Zooms and all that included. Where I don't enjoy being is behind the scenes doing the research and the writing and all that stuff.
See, I love that stuff.
See, that's you. You're the polar opposite. You love doing that. And, I can do it nowhere as well as you do, that's for sure. But the thing is, thank goodness, because we all have those amazing strengths. And it wasn't for all the behind the scenes and the research, we wouldn't be able to do what we do in the front. So Thank you.
Oh, thanks for that.
So interesting today, media, we love media, and we love being able to get things at the drop of a coin. But sometimes getting that information very quickly means that much of that information may be coming to you without the research being done on it, without the proper information. Sometimes it's nothing more than an opinion. And I think we have to make sure that we are getting our information from the right place. So let's talk about melatonin.
Wow. Yeah. Melatonin. I'm very up on the melatonin research, not the least of which because, my company I work for happens to have a couple of different phytomelatonin materials, Nutraland USA. And so, we're doing studies on them. I'm constantly researching and pulling all the data out. So, imagine I'd like to say surprise, but I'm not surprised, but rather my consternation when I see a communication from the American Heart Association. They had a scientific session, their scientific sessions 2025. And in that, they reported a study that they did on melatonin. And it was large scale, and it was it was an analysis of electronic health records from the Try Next Global Research Network. Okay. So they were looking at information that was already there, that was entered. So they didn't actually do original research where it was clinical research or anything. This was strictly an observational kind of study. And so they were looking at people who had chronic insomnia. And they, in their little study, they had a big study, but from health records, found that long-term melatonin use, which was defined as, 1 year or more, was associated with 90% higher odds of a heart failure over 5 years. They found 3.5 greater risk of hospitalization for it, and 2 times higher all-cause mortality in the same period. Now, when you look at something like that, oh my God, melatonin is causing heart failure. We definitely shouldn't be taking this stuff. So the first thing that I think is one needs to consider is, what kind of study it was that we're looking at. So just to briefly switch topics for a moment, but related to this, you may remember back, I don't know, a couple decades ago, something, there was a study done on beta carotene and smokers. And they're like, in the study, we saw a relationship between beta carotene and smokers. So basically, media and everybody went crazy. It's like, if you're smoking, don't take beta carotene. It can increase your risk of lung cancer. Well, this is people who are already smoking, and oh my God, you wouldn't want to increase their. And then when you look at the research, you're like, oh, wait a minute. They stopped the study. They never finished it. There was no statistical significance. Can you imagine if the situation had been reversed and they had said, we're doing the study, people taking beta carotene, and it looked like there was a relationship between it reducing the risk for lung cancer, and then the media looked at it, hey, they never finished the study. Hey, there was no statistical significance. They would tear that apart and go, this means nothing. But yet you reverse it, and they go, look at this stuff, and it was ridiculous. That study has long since. They looked at a lot of different things and found a lot of problems with it, and nobody's worried about that anymore. But it goes to show that you really got to look carefully at it. So when you go back and you say, let's take a closer look at this melatonin study. Well, first of all, the American Heart Association presented a preliminary abstract. To be clear, this wasn't published as a full-text, peer-reviewed article. So so you can't even go in and look at the details and assess it and see if everything makes sense. That's number one. Number two, the study is observational. So it can't prove causation. To be clear, a study that's observational is not the same as an intervention study. An intervention study, like a randomized controlled trial where you give people a specific amount of a nutraceutical, and maybe you have a placebo group and you test them and you look at all the variables, and you can actually see if there's some causation there. Observational doesn't really mean anything ultimately at the end of the day. It's interesting to look at and use as a basis for perhaps then doing an intervention study, but it doesn't mean anything. It's kind of like saying, look, in China, their number one disease is heart disease. Hey, look, all those people were eating a lot of rice. So there's a relationship between rice and heart disease. Well, no, everybody there eats rice, and you don't necessarily, that's observational. So you really need to see what's real. So that was number two. Number three, the study relied on electronic health record. So things were entered. The melatonin use may have been misclassified, especially in places where it's an over-the-counter supplement, and maybe not always captured as a prescription supplement. So that's another thing in areas where it's prescribed. Then fourth, the dose and the formulation and adherence to what they're taking wasn't characterized in the data set, or not well characterized. So you don't even know how much they were using and if they were using it regularly or not. Fifth, the abstract indicates that some of the patients, wait for it, were also taking cardiometabolic drugs, and some of those drugs have been clearly and accurately shown to cause or exacerbate heart failure. Wait, and here's the final one. People who chronically use melatonin may have more severe insomnia and other comorbidities like, anxiety, depression, or other risk factors that themselves contribute to heart failure risk. Now, let's take it just a little step further on this last point. Now, there are several studies that have been done showing that sleep disturbances alone is associated with an increased risk of heart failure. For example, in a prospective cohort study of over 300,000 people who had preclinical heart failure, this was in the UK, poor self-reported sleep quality was strongly associated with future clinical heart failure. Specifically, over a 12-year follow-up, the risk for developing heart failure was 2 times greater in women with poor sleep quality and 1.5 times greater in men with poor sleep quality. And separately, a meta-analysis, and for those who don't know what that is, that's looking at many, many clinical studies, putting that data together and mathematically looking at significance. So a meta-analysis of 7 studies with 177,000 people found that insomnia symptoms are associated with 26% higher risk of heart failure. Among the insomnia symptoms, difficulty initiating sleep showed a particularly strong relationship with heart failure. Now, just one more to drive home the point. In a study combining observational data from the NHANES dietary report surveys, looking at that and genetic analysis reported that sleep disturbances, insomnia, difficulty falling asleep, waking at night, were associated with heart failure. Oh, my goodness. So in the observational part, insomnia was associated with heart failure. And the genetic report showed a causal relationship of sleepiness, which you could genetically predict heart failure. So, in short, if you have any of these sleep disturbances, you are already at higher risk for heart failure. Furthermore, if you have sleep disturbances, you're more likely to use melatonin. But that doesn't mean that the melatonin puts you at the higher risk. In fact, research has shown that melatonin supplementation was actually helpful to people who already had heart failure. There have been human studies on melatonin and heart failure. But before I go into that, why don't I take a pause for a minute and just see if you have any thoughts on that or any questions before I jump into that part?
Well, and to your point, thank you. Thank you for that. I look at today, with everything at the speed of light, research and information coming our way so quickly. And many times we don't talk out of our mouth. We're talking out of our opinions and what we just heard on the bus on the way to work. And the thing is, you forgot, I don't know if you forgot, but we got to remind everybody that, insomnia also can be linked to things like hypertension. And hypertension and obesity, believe it or not. And hypertension in itself is a qualifier for heart situations and cardiovascular problems as well. So there's a lot of things that are connected just from the starting point of insomnia and not getting a good night's or a complete night's rest as well. And so, but this information is amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you. And very good points. And so let me just tell you, the flip side of the coin there is people who have heart failure and are using melatonin. So in a double-blind, randomized, controlled trial, the gold standard, heart failure patients had what was called reduced ejection fraction. This is a condition in heart failure where the heart's left ventricle pumps less than 40% of the blood out with each beat. So in that study, 10 milligrams nightly of melatonin for 24 weeks improved that situation. Wow, interesting. And another cohort of the same study I just mentioned, melatonin significantly improved flow medium dilatation, which is a measure of vascular function, which is very, very important in heart failure. It also reduced oxidative stress And in another randomized double-blind placebo-controlled study with almost 500 elderly patients that were hospitalized for acute heart failure, 3 milligrams of melatonin for 7 days significantly reduced the incidence of delirium compared to placebo, which is another issue that occurs with in some situations of health failure, heart failure rather. Oh, and then in a systematic review and meta-analysis of 7 trials, okay, not all were in heart failure, but some were. Some were in cardiac surgery, some ischemia, but all heart-related. The data showed that modest but significant increase in ventricular ejection fraction, which we just mentioned, and a reduction in some other heart problems were improved with melatonin compared to the control, the placebo. So it actually showed that melatonin in humans as cardioprotective and a very favorable effect. And
Well,
go ahead.
Real quick, I was just going to say, think about all the people and the things they did not take into consideration. People who have already had a cardiovascular malfunction, or they've already had a heart attack or a stroke, number one. Number two, how many of them have clogged arteries throughout the body, and they already have a restricted, kind of blood flow and dilation of everything moving through the body, and carotid artery blockages? They don't address any of that. And number three, you can't just point your finger at something that just sounds easy without taking into consideration all the other factors and what everybody is bringing to the table.
Yes, and that, Jeff, for that very reason, that is why it's important to always remember observational study shows relationships, but not causation. You can't say with an observational study that we have any kind of a definitive cause, only that there's a potential relationship just at a high level. So, yeah, thank you for that again. And also, then, how about just melatonin safety in general? Well, a lot of people may not realize it, but there have been a lot of studies on melatonin safety. Studies using 8 milligrams daily for longer than 6 months, using 10 milligrams daily for longer than 2 months, even high doses like 50 milligrams for people who had cancer. It was part of their therapy. And we've seen data on melatonin being safely used up to 10 milligrams a day for 2 years. So we're seeing a high level of safety. And oh, by the way, just for those people out there who are concerned that, hey, melatonin is a hormone. If I take that, isn't that going to reduce my body's own production of melatonin?
I love that question.
In fact, there are at least 3 human clinical trials demonstrating that the answer is no, it doesn't. That they looked at melatonin levels, people took it. It did not impact the body's own endogenous production of melatonin. You're like, how is that possible? Well, here's why. Unlike something like testosterone or estrogen, when you take it, it can, that your body says, oh, I'm getting it from an outside source, so I don't need to make as much. So yeah, it does have that effect. But what affects melatonin production isn't the presence of existing melatonin. It's light-dark cycles. How much light comes in to your eye and how much dark comes in. When there's a lot of light, you suppress melatonin. When there's dark, melatonin is secreted. That's the natural way of things. And that seems to be fairly much the exclusive source of stimulating melatonin production or stopping it, not taking melatonin. So from the standpoint of this study, and from the standpoint of melatonin safety in general, I think people don't need to have huge concern here. But I also think that the way this study is reported and even some of the conclusions they came to does a huge misservice to the millions of people who are taking melatonin and need it for having a good night's sleep. Listen, as we age, we don't produce as much melatonin as we used to. We simply don't. And being able to take melatonin can make all the difference in the world. My mother, who is 92, going to turn 93 next month, very healthy woman, that takes more supplements than you and I put together, and we take a lot. And eats only organic food and is very health conscious and everything. At 92, guess what? She's got problems falling asleep. And melatonin makes a big difference for her. and she uses it every night. And there's a lot of people like her who need that melatonin, not just elderly, but at different ages. There's different things that can affect melatonin production. And so scaring people into not using it could actually set them up for having more insomnia and potentially a greater risk for heart failure.
Well, it's funny. As much as I travel, I've been very blessed that I never, ever experience jet lag, which is very weird for me.
That's pretty amazing.
Because I go coast to coast to coast, and some trips, one coast to the other and then back. And I just get off the plane, whatever time it is, and I'm in that rhythm and I'm good.
That's
but
awesome.
I know it's very weird, but I'm weird. But I have a lot of friends that travel a lot, and without melatonin, they would not be able to work on their circadian rhythm at all.
I mostly just tend to have sleep issues if I'm traveling internationally, and I'm in, like, I went to China or I went to Europe. That's when my sleep got a little wonky. But I brought melatonin with me, and I only took it once, and I took it like an hour before I wanted to go to bed, and my circadian rhythm reset, and I was good.
Well, and not to bring this a point, but I did mention it earlier, but today we have learned how to receive our information very quickly.
Yes.
People don't hold on, they're not sitting around listening to half-hour, 45-minute news things anymore. They get everything in a blurb. They read it on TikTok. They hear a news alert on Instagram. And, when something like this comes about, what it does is it hits them very heavy, and they run with that momentary kind of opinion or quick line of a news headline, and they don't research it or anything. They just run with it, and they're like, have you heard? Did you hear? My goodness, I just heard this. And what it does is, if it's a very positive thing, that's good, but people tend to run with the negative things more than they do the positive things.
They do run with the negative things, and they just listen to somebody's opinion. They don't really look at the data. One of my favorite sayings is, without data, you're just another person with an opinion. And that is true. Now, to the point where getting more data is important. If I may, I'd like to share a study that I was recently involved with on one of Nutraland's materials called tomato, which is a whole fruit tomato extract with naturally occurring melatonin in there. And just because it's from a plant, it's called phytomelatonin. But a lot of people don't realize that virtually all plants have melatonin because, like animals and humans, it's part of their light-dark cycles. It plays different roles in their development. And so it's there. Only some plants are really viable commercially for doing an extraction. And so, we were able to come up with the first, to my knowledge at the moment, the only actual whole tomato extract standardized for its melatonin content. And so we just did a study. And the name of the study was Effects of Tomato Fruit Extract on Key Physiological and Psychological Domains Associated with Sleep Quality, Autonomic Function, and Health-Related Quality of Life. Now, this was a pilot study. We wanted to see how it went before, really putting together, investing in a large randomized control trial. Luckily, it went so well. We have now engaged another clinical research organization to do this larger randomized control trial. Nice. But a lot of times when you see pilot studies, it's maybe 10 or 12 people. We did do 22 people. And what was interesting about this study is we did it for 28 days. And you can use standardized, scientifically validated questionnaires. And we certainly did that. That includes things like the Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Index. That's kind of like the granddaddy of all qualified sleep surveys. We also used what's known as the short form 36 Health Survey, which looks at different aspects of quality of life. But we also said we want to do something that is objective instead of just subjective, something that could be measured physiologically. So we engaged a clinical research organization who was able to get people who all had the Aura ring. And the Aura ring will measure your sleep, how many times you get up, your heart rate, look at many different parameters, totally objectively. All right. And so the study went for that 28-day period of time. And even though we didn't have a placebo group because it was a pilot study, in a sense, everybody that was enrolled acted as their own placebo group because we had data going back 1 month before they ever started the study from their Aura ring. We could see what their sleep patterns were, and we could compare it. So it was a pretty good as a pilot study goes. And so what we found was that of those 22 people, when you compare it to the baseline, supplementation with the Semedo phytomelatonin significantly improved what's called change in sleep latency, which means ability to fall asleep faster. If you looked at the Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Index, people fell asleep 33% faster. If you looked at the Aura ring, about 12% faster. People had less time awake. People had better sleep efficiency, and their global Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Index score, which looks at a number of things, was increased over 14%. Now, each of these things I mentioned actually were all statistically significant. We actually looked at the p-value. Are these things statistically significant? They each were. So that's pretty amazing. But we said, okay, let's look at some of the other things that that SF36 quality of life questionnaire did. What did it show? Well, in there, we saw some improvements that did not quite reach statistical significance, but they still had some very interesting improvements. So general health improved over 3%, energy and fatigue improved over 15%, limitations that the person had due to emotional problems, that improved 15%, pain improved almost 6%, social functioning improved 6%, and physical functioning improved almost 3%. So there was a lot of improvements associated with this. And what I think is particularly interesting is in the melatonin world today, it's almost a horsepower thing. When it came out in the market, you remember, you were around.
Yes.
And it was coming out, it was like 1 milligram at the time. And then it became 3 milligrams. Then it was available at 5 milligrams. And it was like 10 milligrams. God help us, you can go on Amazon and find it at 20 milligrams at huge amounts, which I don't recommend for reasons I'll tell you in a minute. But we use 2 milligrams. 2 milligrams of our phytomelatonin. Now, why did we use 2 milligrams instead of at least 3? Because, first of all, there's a whole lot of studies already out there showing that 1 milligrams and even some that 0.3 milligrams are effective, and 2 milligrams. And so we say, well, why do we need to go higher? When you look at the study and you compare 10 milligrams to like 3 milligrams, are you getting any meaningful differences? No. You're getting it about the same. People just like the idea of taking more. It's going to work better because I'm taking more. Not necessarily. And one of the reasons, the other thing is that we found from a previous study we did on one of our other melatonins, one derived from St. John's wort, another phytomelatonin, that it has its own entourage compounds, just like our one from tomato does. And they seem to impact it in a positive way, because in that other study, we found that 1 milligram or 3 milligrams of our phytomelatonin worked just as well or better than 10 milligrams of synthetic.
Wow.
Yeah. So in many of the cohorts within this very large study, which was like 1,200 people. And so I think that a lot of times, and we find things like, yes, we know that melatonin is the primary compound that's doing the job, but there are other things that work with it. For example, our Semedo has naturally occurring GABA with it. It has naturally occurring lycopene, which there's studies showing that when lycopene levels drop, you have poorer sleep quality. So there's things that are playing a role when you use it from a natural source. And I know I don't need to tell you the advantages of the natural source, that are making a difference that you don't get with just the synthetic. Now, one of the things to keep in mind with the synthetic, first of all, I'm not going to poo-poo the synthetic melatonin, even though 98% or more of what's on the market is that, because there's lots of studies on it and it works.
Yep.
It works. That being said, there are concerns when you get to high levels. In the scientific literature, there was published a very interesting study in which that was recommended that doctors who are working with cancer patients, where they use high doses like 50 milligrams or 100 milligrams a day of melatonin, not use synthetic melatonin, but use natural phytomelatonin instead. And the reason for it was this. Among other things, there's a couple of different methods for synthetically producing melatonin. One of the methods produces about 0.5% other compounds that are not filtered out. So they're part of the melatonin when you put it in the pill. These other compounds include one called PEAK-X, which you may remember from back in the late 80s. Tryptophan was contaminated with some of this PEAK-X material.
Remember that?
And some people died as a result of eosinophilia myalgia syndrome because of this stuff. Well, guess what? When you make melatonin synthetically, you get a tiny, tiny bit of it. Now, relax, it's not enough to cause any harm. At least not when you're talking about maybe up to 10 milligrams. What happens when you're taking 50 or 100 milligrams, though? Is it enough to cause harm? Well, the authors of this one article in the literature that I mentioned seem to think it's a risk. So why take the risk? Just use the natural phytomelatonin, which they also said in the study is likely to work better anyway. So
let me ask you a personal question, because I know this is going to come up. How do you feel about melatonin for younger individuals, or do you feel there should be an age cutoff for beginning melatonin?
Yeah, so here are my thoughts on it. You want to make sure. So first of all, let me talk about the safety aspect of it. There's been a number of studies looking at safety, and they found that it has a really high safety index. It's fairly safe to use with children. Now, my child, who's now 26.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. You remember when he's a baby.
I do.
He's on the autism spectrum, very high functioning, but kids on the autism spectrum often have trouble sleeping. And there's been studies on them with melatonin use showing to help them sleep. So my son, since he was, I'm going to say 10 because I don't remember the age, he used melatonin every night and has since then and continues to. And it's helped him, and he has no ill effects that are apparent. In studies, they found no ill effects. Now, what about a kid? They also have used it in kids with ADHD, okay, safely and effectively. But let's say it's a kid who doesn't have that. Is it safe to use? And so the question, my thoughts about it are this. First of all, you want to take a look and see, for a child, why aren't they sleeping? What's going on in the first instance? So my approach would be, let me look at it and see what's going on. Are they very excitable? Are they, something else going on? Are there some kind of stress or anxiety going on? What's causing the problem? If it turns out they have ADHD, well, we know that melatonin can be useful. But if it's none of those things and it's just something else, can they use it? Well, the answer is they possibly can. However, in that situation, I'm always going to say, anybody can feel free and should be able to check with the kid's pediatrician. But my thoughts are, yes, but you don't want to go high doses. Don't want to go high doses. 1 milligram, 3 milligrams max. Don't be going higher than that if there's no problem. God forbid they get a hold of a bottle of your parents' 10 milligram phytomelatonin, or not phyto, regular melatonin gummies or something, and start munching away at it. That's too much. All right. So I would keep it very, very low. 1 milligram, 3 milligrams should be enough to do the trick. But again, I would look at other issues and check those out first. If the parents doing all those things and the kid is just not getting enough sleep and it's affecting, their health and well-being, then yes, I think that as long as you check with the pediatrician, I think it's perfectly reasonable to use that.
So definitely low and slow.
Yes, low and slow, not the higher dose. And even with adults who haven't used it before, I'll tell them, start out at a lower dose. I have a good friend of mine who's a rabbi, and he was talking to me about having trouble sleeping. And this is years ago. I said, try melatonin. And I said, try 3 milligrams. He was using it. He's like, it's working, but I have I'm so groggy in the morning. I'm so groggy. And I said, try 1 milligram melatonin. 1 milligram works perfect for him. He gets good sleep, and he doesn't feel groggy in the morning. Not everybody feels groggy in the morning from melatonin. Oh, by the way, that's one of the things that we've noticed, comments that we've had, although we haven't included it in the study, is that people using our phytomelatonin don't seem to have that morning grogginess that some people have. And so in our new study, we're actually going to measure that.
Do me a favor. When we were at Supply Side, I saw you had a very, very large presence there, the company, a big booth, and it
Yeah.
was really nice. So maybe just give a little kudos and call outs to your company and how you would describe what you do.
I went to work for Nutraland back in 2023. And when a division of Twin Lab that I used to work for closed, one of the reasons that when the offer was made, that I decided to take it is because I liked what the company was doing. And I've just been around, so have you, Jeff, way too long to look at a company and go, oh, I'm going to go work for them because it's a job. If you don't feel good about what they're doing, you have to feel good about it. You have this whole regenerative farming angle, which is fantastic. You can feel really good about what you're doing. And what I liked is the president of the company, who was one of the two owners, he's so ethical in everything he wanted to do right. And I remember when we would talk about things, he was the kind of guy who, when a very, very large MLM, who shall remain nameless, was interested in using our phytomelatonin and had some parameters that they wanted to have in order to do it, and we had a discussion, he said, I don't think our product's going to work for you. I think because you want this, this, and this, and we don't have those elements at this time. I mean, we may in the future, but I don't want to lead you down the wrong path. I mean, this was like millions of dollars worth of business that he was just saying, no, I don't think it's what you need. I think you need something else. Turns out they liked that. They decided that we're still in discussions, but because those big companies take forever. But it looks like something good's going to happen. So he always wanted to do the right thing. He never wants to exaggerate claims. He always wants to do it right. And the level of everything that's done. And when I was in China, I had the opportunity to see our manufacturing facility there, which, by the way, is one of the few that have ever been inspected by the US FDA and passed with flying colors. I mean, you could eat off that floor. That place was so clean. Their GMPs were so perfect. Everything was just phenomenal. I was so impressed. And I like everything that's being done. Honest, straightforward, totally transparent, more documentation on any raw material that I've ever seen. And I get to coordinate clinical studies on these things. So I was very thrilled. My job as chief scientific officer, aside from helping to coordinate the clinical studies, also includes education. Like you do education. A lot of times my education is at the trade shows, speaking there. I'm often invited to do other, conferences, and I'll speak at some of these other conferences. That's what I was doing in China. I do a lot of writing, as you know, and so I put out my regular newsletter. I write every month for Vitamin Retailer magazine, and I try to keep people educated on, what's new, what's interesting, what's true, what's untrue, and a number of things scientifically that might come up. And one of the things that's so cool, I mean, I used to spend a lot. I still do some formulation for some companies of dietary supplements, but and I love formulating, but I'd never had the chance to actually help in the development of brand new ingredients that are brought to market. And that's what I get to do now. We get to have these cool conversations. What about if we did this? Let's investigate this. So we'll go to our R&D guy. Could you use a source that provides this and create that? And we're coming up with all kinds of interesting stuff that, slowly, carefully, doing the studies first, and that sort of thing. So
I love
that's
it.
a lot of what I'm doing these days. And and then writing up the manuscripts when the studies are completed and submitting them for publication. I have just finished and submitting and got published 2 of our studies, one on the somato phytomelatonin and another one on our Miracell rice germ spermidine material. And we've got others in process, and I'm writing up a manuscript right now on our AKK postbiotic. Fantastic results. And I have a couple of others I have to write up while we're in the process of doing new studies. So it's great. I just love it.
I love it because I think that company is a very, very class act, as are you. And
Thank you.
I think it's, I really appreciate this today, taking the time to give people some tools. And I'll make sure that this drops very quickly so we can get it out there so it's very timely as well. I hope you guys enjoyed this today. I've been speaking with Gene Bruno. If you like what you heard, remember, go to my platforms, like what we're doing. If you are watching the video on YouTube, just scroll up, hit the subscribe button. Remember, we're trying to get all of this amazing information out, and I'm trying to give amazing visibility to these just incredible guests that I'm so blessed to have, because we're talking here about the very latest things in good health and well-being from inside and outside the natural products industry. Everybody just taking the time to share this wonderful information. I thank you all for being here. Gene, once again, thank you, my friend.
Thank
It's
you.
a pleasure. And will you come back and see us again?
Always, Jeff. Always. For you, anything.
That's what I'm looking to do. Have a great day, everybody. I hope this was beneficial and really good for you. And remember, pass this information on. If you're having a conversation out there with somebody and they're talking about this topic coming up on melatonin, please refer them to this, because there's a lot of good information in here. And I think it'll give them what they need to be able to make a valid decision in their own mind. Because I think a lot of us are running around with a quick opinion rather than a lot of factual information. So make sure you tell them to tune in. Have a great day, everybody. Be well, and God bless.
Stay tuned for more information from the Honest Health Podcast with Jeffrey Burke. And make sure to check back often for interviews and conversations from the guests we all want to hear from. I'm John the Announcer. Thanks for listening.